I was 9 years old, and I guess she said I had heard it was a good movie, and I wanted to see it. So I was
Thought it was a movie about camping.
Was a connoisseur of cinema at a young age. From 9 years old, I asked to see Brokeback Mountain, but there's like a pretty aggressive sex scene at like the 25-minute mark probably of the movie.
Yeah.
And I came out and I was like, I don't think this movie is about like I don't think this is a Western, a traditional Western.
Welcome to Backseat Directing,
where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Aaron.
And we post new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're doing a movie review on Brokeback Mountain.
3, 2, 1. Yeehaw.
We were in sync.
We did it. I often wonder if our openings seem pre-recorded because I feel like I say the things like the exact same way.
Yeah, so. Lately your thing has been a 3, a 2, a 1.
Well, no, this one was a Southern accent. It was like 3, 2.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not that good with accents, but...
I know. I said at lately. That's what you're doing. So you switched it up this time.
Speaking of accents, the accents in this movie were very good.
Yeah.
Now... The movie that we're covering is Brokeback Mountain, came out in 2005. I'm very excited to discuss this with you. Was it the first time you watched it?
It is. I have not seen this movie before.
So I had actually seen part of the movie when I confirmed this story with my mother the other day because it was Mother's Day yesterday. And I was talking to her. I was like, do you remember when I watched Brokeback Mountain? And she started dying laughing. So if you don't know, it's also R-rated. And I was 9 years old, and I guess she said I had heard it was a good movie, and I wanted to see it. So I was
thought it was a movie about camping.
Was a connoisseur of cinema at a young age. From 9 years old, I asked to see Brokeback Mountain, and we got it from wherever, from Netflix, and it came in the little slip in the mail. We used to.
Did you say Netflix?
Yeah, we used to get the.
Oh my god!
The slip in the mail, the little my mom, she was saying too that we should be legacy account holders. She said we should get a discount because we had Netflix before they streamed.
We would do Blockbuster, and then eventually we did like Redbox.
Yeah, we did Blockbuster too way back, but the well, we got it in the mail, and she said that I was watching the movie, and I just walked out of the room, and I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be watching this.
You were watching by yourself?
Yeah, I made it to the point where like there's basically, spoiler alert, we are going to spoil the movie, but there's like a pretty aggressive sex scene at like the 25-minute mark probably of the movie.
Yeah.
And I came out and I was like, I don't think this movie is about like, I don't think this is a Western, a traditional Western. And yeah, so I didn't finish the movie back then.
So you stopped it.
So this was the first time I watched the movie all the way through. I guess you could call it that. But I was really excited to watch the movie all the way through, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, it was good, and it was a good like kind of change in genre too. We've been a lot of superhero movies lately, so
this is the kind of thing that I feel like I've been waiting for. Like when you said when we stepped out of John Wick, because we watched a lot of John Wick movies in 1 week.
Yes.
And then so this is, I feel like we switched over a little bit to like, I feel like it's like a breath of fresh air, like you said, maybe a little more critical, artsy movie. And I really love picking apart these kinds of movies.
Yeah, it was a good movie. This movie is, I'm going to go into the summary of the movie, and then we'll kind of break down all the statistics.
Awesome. What's the movie about?
In the summer of 1963, two roughneck cowboys take a job herding sheep on Brokeback Mountain. The two men fall in love, but struggle with their sexuality. Over the next 20 years, they navigate the waters of growing families and fulfilling traditional masculine roles while harboring deeply passionate feelings for someone they each feel like they can't be with.
Just tragic. That when you look on IMDb, the genres for this movie are drama and romance. Mm-hmm. And I found myself being really hit by the romance aspects of this movie in a way that I didn't quite expect. And I feel like maybe the reason I didn't expect it is because I am heterosexual, so maybe I didn't expect to like identify with it so much, but it's such a strength of this movie because Heath Ledger talks about it in a really cool interview that I want to discuss. I don't know if you've seen this little clip, it's like a 2-minute clip, but he talks about, in a way, he says the idea of love being universal, and like, yes, this movie flips kind of traditional ideals on its head, ideals of masculinity, ideas of the cowboy, middle America, but that's kind of the point, is that love is universal. And I feel like you find yourself really enthralled in this love story, and it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman or two men, which is what happens to be in the story. And like, I was really like enthralled with this romance. Like, I put it in my top 3 romance movies of all time after I finished watching it. I told Sierra, it's like, wow, Stuck in Love, Crazy Stupid Love, and Brokeback Mountain.
Dang, that's pretty high praise there to bring it into the top 3. I'd say I kind of connected to it in more of like a slow burn, you know, like as the movie went on, I got more and more invested in them being together. And I feel like that's just kind of the flow of the movie. I feel like the movie was kind of like that. Like once I picked up on like what pace we're going with here, then I kind of was able to settle into the story more.
It's a very different movie to watch in our position because it's not 2005 and we kind of have an idea of what the movie's about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a totally different experience the way we're watching it in 2023. It's through like a totally different lens, not only for our time period, but also just for some of the natural inherent spoilers of a movie existing for whatever, 18 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It came out a while ago. And during that time, like this stuff was suppressed even more than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, the story takes place in 1960s to start, so 1960s to the 80s. So in that time period, really terrible. But then even in 2005, like you said, not as easy a time as it is now. So this movie was definitely really groundbreaking. I read different reviews, and I saw one gentleman, he said that he's like, I am a homosexual man who lives in middle America. I think he said actually in Wyoming, and that the movie, to him, getting to see like a more masculine representation of a gay man in a movie was like meant a lot to him, that it was inspiring to him. And so I think that I've also seen other reviews just saying that this movie kind of paved the way for more representation for the LGBTQ community in cinema and in mainstream cinema, in more art, like more of these kind of movies that get Oscar attention as well. So this movie is super groundbreaking, and it's not just a good movie, but it's also like
it's groundbreaking in the sense that it's like it took a risk.
It took a risk, and I think it paid off in a really beautiful way. I mean, I think the world would agree. I mean, what do the ratings say?
Okay, so this movie, as we said, came out in 2005. It's rated R. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes long, and it won 3 Oscars. We have directing, adapted screenplay, play, and original score. IMDb has it at a 7.7 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes for the critics has it 88% with 250 reviews. And then audience score has it at 82%, which I feel like both of those numbers are higher than I was expecting them to be.
The 82%?
Yeah, not because the movie is worse than
because
of like people's perception of this kind of movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And also like the subject matter, you always get review bombing when something goes out on a limb, and
and like,
they've got
a lot of time when, especially like the Rotten Tomatoes, a lot of times when you don't like something, you're more likely to leave a review than if you do like something. So the fact that 82% of the reviews out of 250,000 were positive, you know, like, that was more than I was expecting it to be.
But the positive reviews are definitely representative of what the movie deserves. You talked about Oscars. Yes. This movie got a lot of attention. So
they were like nominated in like every category.
It should have swept that year. It lost Best Picture to Crash, which from what I've read was a shock to some. It said Jack Nicholson, who presented the award, seemed to be surprised, and there was a hush in the crowd. Everyone expected Brokeback Mountain to win Best Picture, but it went to Crash instead, which is also a good movie. So Best Supporting, Michelle Williams and Jake Gyllenhaal were both nominated. Heath Ledger's nominated for Best Actor, and then, like you said, they won Best Director with Ang Lee. He was the first Asian American actually ever to win Best Director. And part of a small group. I think there's only less than 10 Asian Americans that have ever won an Oscar. I think they might have gone up to 11 with these last Oscars with the cast of Everything Everywhere All at Once. But Ang Lee is also the first person of color in general to win a Best Director. So they also were nominated for Best Writing of an Adapted Screenplay and nominated for Best Cinematography and Best Original Score. Incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Let's kind of go into our ratings a little bit. We break down movies into 6 categories, each of which have a little bit different of a weighting depending on how important we think it is to the overall movie. The first category is story, and this is out of 10. I put an 8 out of 10. Andrew, what did you put down?
I put 10 out of 10.
Dang, okay. Yeah, so commonly Andrew says a 10 out of 10 is how you compare other movies to this category. So out of all other movie stories, a 10 out of 10, every movie is going to be kind of compared to this movie. Is it on this level? So this is at the top for you.
This is at the absolute top for me. I think that it tells a unique story. At the time, it tells a story that I don't think anything like it had been told before. It's a play on the traditional kind of forbidden love. I mean, it's similar to Romeo and Juliet, but there's very, very different subtext. And I think that they executed it really flawlessly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the story was great too.
Yeah. I think there's a reason that they were nominated for Best Writing in the Adapted Screenplay category. They actually won for that category as well.
Yes. Our next category is acting. We have this out of 10 as well. I put 8 out of 10. What did you put?
10 out of 10.
Dang, Andrew, the last few movies we've done, you've been just throwing out high scores.
I've been very favorable to them, but I feel like they're deserved scores.
Yeah, I think the acting was solid in this movie, even above solid. You know, I think Jake Gyllenhaal and why did I lose his name?
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger blew it out of the park. You know, and
Michelle Williams as well. Her performance as Alma, I think it can be lost as her not having as much screen time as the two men, but really, really phenomenal. And kind of that shot we talked about off camera which we'll get into, where she sees her husband kissing another man for the first time. There's so much there. I mean, there's really no shock. It's just like a deep sadness. And like maybe it was even something she suspected. So she's really phenomenal in this movie as well.
Yeah, just like the overall like pacing and structure of the story was really cool. And they made it feel like it's real life. You know, just the way that the actors like went about things, you know, like it felt like real dialogue, yeah, and especially when they were in the mountains for the first time, you know, and like Ennis wasn't talking, you know, and he's very quiet, and they had that one conversation. He's like, "That's the most I've spoke all in 8 years or something."
Yeah, he said,
that's
the most that that's the most that you said since we've been out here. He's like, "That's the most I said all year."
Yeah.
Also, I mean, the voice acting, dialect coaching, the practical use of scenery, the practical use of animals with the sheep. It's so much lends to it feeling real. They feel like real fleshed out full characters. You feel like they're disappeared into these people.
Yeah. And I feel like Heath Ledger did such a good job that you could almost like overpass or overlook how good of a job he did, you know, because his character, he's playing someone who's a little more stoic, a little more quiet, you know, like who isn't expressing or as like crazy with their actions and stuff. So I feel like you can kind of miss it. It's kind of like the little subtle things, you know, like just how he opens his mouth when he's talking, you know, like his upper lip doesn't move that much, like kind of like he's got something in his mouth, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and he's such a good example of repression in everything from that tightness of the facial structure to like when words do come out, they're whispered almost, like it's not real force. He's not outspoken. And then he's a good his repression also shows in the way that it builds up and explodes. Like it's a good representation of repression in cinema in general, because he's hiding who he is, hiding how he really feels. He's holding everything in, and then there's like climactic moments of explosion in the movie, like when he hits Jack Twist, when he fights those guys in the scene with the fireworks, when he grabs Alma and
one of
shakes her.
Most like relatable scenes to me was when he like said goodbye to Jack after their first time on the mountain, and they were like, yeah, like can't really meet up again, you know, like we don't really know when we're gonna be able to see each other. Like I'm gonna be busy, you're gonna be busy, blah blah blah. And then like afterwards, he just like broke down in frustration, sadness, maybe anger too, that maybe he didn't like say more of
Yeah,
like, or
that's how I
make,
took it too.
make more effort to like make plans to see each other again, because it's what he wants to do. He just doesn't know how to get it out. And I feel like that a lot, where it's like, this is what I want, but for some reason I just can't get the words out to say it. And then the moment passes and all I can do is like beat myself up, is like, why didn't I say that? You know, like that's what I wanted this whole time and I couldn't get it out.
I think it's also part of that scene too, is his anger at himself for the way he left things with Jack, because he just punched him in the face. And like, I mean, they had that fight and then they left on such a bad note. I think the way things ended really frustrated him. And then there's a symbolism that I wanted to talk about in some point in the episode, where the cowboy hats that they wear are a manifestation of like masculinity, or like traditional masculinity, which is like being stoic, hiding your emotions, kind of these things that are now we're realizing are so hurtful and bad for our health. But so there's different points where the hat itself is used to cover his genitals, his heart, and his face. And the scene that you brought up, he's like punching the wall, hunkered down, arched over, crying, you know, in his most vulnerable state. And the hat, he's held to the side of his face, to the open side of the alley, covering his face to any passersby, where he eventually yells at that guy. But he's hiding his tears. And then there's when he first approaches, or the second time he approaches Jack, actually, the second time that they are going to make love in the tent, he approaches the tent with the hat covering his genitals, you know, kind of repressing his physical intimacy, his physical sexuality, in my opinion. And then as he crouches down, he holds the hat up and covers over his chest, because now he's closer face to face with Jack. I see it as him kind of creating that barrier between him and using that symbol of masculinity to shield his heart, because he's worried there's more to this relationship than physical, and he's already not willing to accept the physical side of the relationship. I think there's so many cool details like this in the movie that are granular, and you can miss them at not looking at the movie under a microscope.
That was a really cool observation. I noticed when he was covering it over his genitals, but I didn't like make the connection of like covering his heart. I still kind of picked up on the same feelings, but I didn't like make that correlation. So that was really cool. Our next category that we use to rank our movies is cinematography. And for cinematography, this takes into account like composition, camera movement, color grading, special effects.
It's a great movie for composition, I think.
And just like location. You know, like I gave this as well an 8 out of 10. Did you give it a 10 out of 10?
I also gave it 8 out of 10.
Okay.
I kind of knock at some points for, I think, just 2005 poor special effects that don't hold up. And every time I think that it might be kind of unfair, I look at scenes from Jurassic Park and I'm like, this still looks so good.
What special effects are you referring to in particular?
I just think some of the shots where they added in the storm, which is another metaphor in the movie that, in my opinion, but some of the shots where they were digitally adding in the storm, I think were very clearly special effects from 2005.
I really enjoyed the composition, the edit, the cut, you know, like I think they did a great job of not distracting you from the story, but like subtly improving it, enhancing the story. Like you said, like just the camera movement of like he opens the tent and he's covering himself with the cowboy hat, you know, and then he falls down into frame more, and like I think they did a great job of like filming and editing this movie.
Yeah, they really chose the right times, in my opinion, to let the actors do their jobs with the distance from the camera, because the close-up shots are used really well with both the main actors, especially with Ennis, to let him get his points across. Like you said, he doesn't use a lot of words. So they use these close-up shots to let him express himself. And then they have wide shots in scenes that need them, like the scene where
A lot of wide shots, a lot of locked off shots just on sticks, tripods.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I was thinking of the scene with Jake Gyllenhaal where the scene where he iconically says, "I wish I could quit you." And he's really emotionally having an expression of all these pent up emotions over the years, and he's getting to use his body. Like, that's when you should have a wide shot. So I think they chose things very wisely.
Our next category here is sound design. This goes in with original score, all the Foley that you would hear, like their footsteps, all that special sound effects that go into making a movie, which I think it'd surprise people how much is not captured in camera. Pretty much everything you're hearing outside of their voices, and even sometimes their voices, is done after the fact, which is really crazy to think that someone sits there and does that for a whole 2.5-hour movie,
Yeah, it's hard to do out in nature too, where there's such a variety of sounds, such an uncontrolled environment.
Yeah, they probably, for this movie, captured a lot of the sounds on location, just probably not within the shot that you're actually seeing. For this, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
For sound design, I also gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I thought it was solid. The original score won an Oscar, and the main theme that's playing throughout the movie is really solid. And I liked how they kind of changed the intensity of it as it kind of went through the movie. But there wasn't anything like super crazy, that stuck out. To bring it over the top for me. But it kind of like cinematography, it was subtle to where you don't overly notice it, but without it, you would miss some of the emotion that you'd get with it there. Do you have anything to add to the sound design?
I like the original score. It was kind of, I feel like, a relatively simple tone when I heard it. I think there's one instance.
I like that though. I feel like it fits.
Yeah. I do like the more simple scores. It's simple but effective. There's one instance in the movie that I feel like kind of almost felt cheesy, like a sitcom tone where it played. I think they embraced, and it was like, and played their little tone, and it felt kind of maybe loud and poorly timed.
Singular moments really well. That's really cool. I can't do that. I think of when I think of memories and stuff, I think of the general feeling that I felt.
I type notes while I watch these too.
Maybe I should start doing that. Our next category is set/character design, which this one's unique because a lot of it was in person.
Yeah.
They were on location. They were in the mountains herding sheep.
But we also encapsulate costume design into this as part of the character. And they use really authentic materials and style for the time period, and going from 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think also just changing the hairstyles, the facial hair of the main characters to not only show that time had passed, but to show that, different styles and different time periods.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see the difference. The thing that I appreciated a lot was when they take their hat off, they have hat hair.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they just put it on for the scene and it's their hair's not all messed up or sweaty. It looks like their hat has been on for a long time when they took it off.
The movie prioritized realism over perfection, certainly, which realism is perfection if you ask, most people. And they, the other thing, the attention to detail is crazy. You can watch throughout the movie as their life progresses, their body and clothes match their lifestyle. There's a point where Jake Gyllenhaal, one of the times they're going out camping together, you notice that he starts to put on some weight, and it's comfort weight. He's been in a marriage, he has a comfortable job, but you don't notice them adding that to Ennis, because it's not just to show that time has passed, it's to show the lifestyle. Ennis is still out there, cowboying. He's still out there doing this herding or whatever, different jobs. He calls it something, but he's staying in shape because his nature of his job is still physical.
Yeah. Our last category is rewatchability, and this is out of 5. So the way that I think of how to give this a score is, how many times are you going to watch this movie out of 5? So if I ask you, Andrew, you want to watch this movie and I do it 5 times, how many times are you going to say yes?
We didn't give our rating for set/character design. We just talked about it.
Did we not? Oh my gosh, I think you're totally right. So that's also out of 5. I gave that a 3.5. What'd you give it?
I gave it a 4.
A 4? Okay, so pretty close there. I liked it because of, again, like they were on practical sets. Like there's something that you can't beat that. I think
Such a beautiful landscapes too. God, I just love to look at it. Like I could just watch a running screen of those like rapids and everything. But what did you end up putting for the rewatchability?
Rewatchability, I have it at a 1.5 for me. And I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing. I think I've kind of got everything from the story the first time.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I would never rewatch this. It's just the likelihood of me watching this is pretty low.
Yeah.
And it's probably that way for any romance movie, not to say I wouldn't rewatch it, but I'm not going to jump back on it as likely as another movie.
Not going to get back up on that horse.
That's right.
And I gave it a 2 out of 5 for the rewatchability. And I think it's also partly, it's because of all the things you said, but also because it's tough subject matter.
Yeah.
And you have to be in a certain mood to go back. And especially with the ending of this movie, which we'll get to and spoil, you have to, it's not something that you want to watch every day. It's emotional. It takes a toll on you to watch certain movies,
This wasn't really a happy movie.
It wasn't happy at all. And this is actually commonly thought of as a trope in cinema for gay and LGBTQ people that it's always tragedy with those characters. And I think it's partly because the emotionality is so rich in those cases, because there's inherently so much to overcome. It's also inherently deeply emotional, and they want audiences to feel that emotion. So they do kind of get picked on in that way. They say that they don't let gay couples be happy in movies. It's always something.
Yeah, not much happened that was good. Especially the ending was, like you said, hard to watch. You have to be in a certain mood to watch this type of movie. All right. So that is our ratings of the individual score. So my overall score comes out to a 7.2 out of 10. What did you get?
Mine comes out 1 whole point higher at an 8.2 out of 10.
Okay, nice. It's all those 10 out of 10s that you gave for the first few categories.
It accurately makes up for the rewatchability score I gave it, and the movie totals out to a score that I think symbolizes how I view it.
Yeah. I think partially I'm just afraid to give a movie a perfect score on something. I don't think I've done that yet.
In any category?
I don't think so. Maybe I did on Creed 3, but I can't think of any other movie that we've actually reviewed.
For what? On Creed cinematography or?
Maybe. I think so. So I don't know. I think I just have a hard time this was perfect. Because what if there's something that I like more?
Yeah. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect,
Yeah.
10's the top 1% of the crop.
So that wraps up all of the ratings. Let's go on to the budget, box office numbers, and then after that, we'll go into who made this movie.
Sounds good.
So the budget for this movie kind of surprised me in the sense of we haven't reviewed a ton of movies that have this low of a budget. Do you know what it is?
I've seen it before.
Yeah. But it doesn't surprise me in terms of the scale of the movie. It's definitely oh yeah, I can see why it was that. But
was it 40 million?
No, it was 14.
I knew there was a 4.
14. Yeah. So that's just a lot lower than most of the movies that we're reviewing. So it kind of caught me by surprise.
But it was a huge success.
Yes. It brought in the box office $178 million.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big multiplier above.
That's pretty huge return on investment. That studio must have been really excited.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's go into who made this movie in front and behind the camera.
All right, so in this segment, we talk about who's in front of and behind the camera, but we usually like to start with who is behind the camera. I'm going to go through it a little bit quicker than I normally would because I want to make sure we have time to discuss the characters in this movie and the arc that they go on, some of the themes and symbolism as well. So the director for this movie is Ang Lee. Ang Lee has a really good career in Hollywood, directing other movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Life of Pi, Gemini Man, and the original Hulk with Eric Bana, plus a bunch of other movies. But is an awesome director who has a great filmography. For under cinematography, we have Rodrigo Prieto, who absolutely knocked it out of the park with this film, as we already discussed. The music is done by, I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of the last name, but Gustavo Santaolalla. I can't get that at all.
If you can't, I can't. So
Santaolalla, maybe. It's a lot. It's a lot of letters. But then, his work won an Oscar for this movie, so you can't take... Pretty much everybody in one of these categories was nominated or won an Oscar.
Right.
And then I want to also start to mention the editors as well for movies. This movie is edited by Geraldine Perroni and Dylan Ticanor. Hope I'm pronouncing that last name right as well. But moving on to the cast who's in front of the camera, we have our stars. The star of this movie, who was nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role, Heath Ledger as Ennis Del Mar. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Jack Twist. Michelle Williams brilliantly portrays Alma. Anne Hathaway portrays Lorene Newsome. Linda Cardinelli is Cassie. Anna Faris plays LaShawn Malone. David Harbour, who I was surprised to see in this movie. You might recognize him as Hopper from Stranger Things, or as Red Guardian from The Avengers, or as Hellboy. He plays Randall Malone. And Kate Mara is Alma Jr., who Kate Mara has a pretty good career now as well. She's an up-and-coming actress. Now, that is everyone that I have in front of the screen. Who did you enjoy the most in the movie?
Before I get to that, it kind of surprised me that Anne Hathaway was in this movie. Because, I feel like she's a big-time actress.
So
I feel like she was underused. She was barely in the movie.
So she actually was originally attached to play Alma. And she had a audition lined up. And she ended up doing her audition in a big foofy princess dress. She was on set of Princess Diaries 2 filming a parade scene, and she did her audition on her lunch break, and her agent actually had to apologize for the fact that she showed up in this outfit. But she found herself being more attracted or interested in the Lorene character, which I think is strange because I think Alma is a way better role, but I think it was more so her personal preference. She ended up playing Alma because she was there's all kinds of different people attached to this movie at one point. Different directors too. Joel Schumacher and Gus Van Sant, Joel Schumacher, director of Batman, Gus Van Sant directed Good Will Hunting. Good directors were attached at one point to direct this movie. Ended up being directed by Ang Lee, which I think I'm glad it was, because it wouldn't be the movie it is. But and then a bunch of actors were attached too. Joaquin Phoenix was at one point considered to play the role. I believe Ennis, and people have said that he was offered the role, but he denies it. He says that if he was offered it, he definitely would have accepted it. But he was considered, and a bunch of other actors. I think Josh Hartnett was considered. There's a list of people who were considered.
People are going to think that was staged, but that was just all off the cuff. That was good. You didn't know that I was going to bring her up right there. That was good.
You teed me up really well.
Yeah.
I had that information in mind.
Nice, man. Okay, what was the original question? Who was my favorite character?
Yeah, your favorite, either performance or character, both.
I think the character that I related to the most was Ennis. How he's
holding your emotions in.
Yeah, it kind of keeps things close to the chest.
It's it's a pressure on men in general.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. Sometimes you feel like you have to be really tough in certain situations, and you have to kind of put on this facade, in a sense. And I can relate to him suppressing his emotions and keeping things close to the chest. And I think Heath Ledger did a great job of portraying that on screen. Like I said before, that it's hard to act a character that's very subtle like that, and make it deeper to where, yes, he's saying these things or going through these actions, but to where on screen you can see that there's more going on deep down. Mm-hmm. That's hard to portray, especially if that's not how you are in real life, Yeah,
it's hard to argue that it's not the best performance in the movie. I think that Gyllenhaal and Michelle Williams are both contenders. All these performances in the movie are great. Even the smaller roles like Linda Cardinelli, fantastic. But Heath Ledger is just so amazing in this role, and every time I watch a movie with him, it makes me so deeply saddened to know that we won't get more performances from him, because he had such a bright career ahead of him. Every role that I've seen him in is phenomenal, and I've seen dialect coaches praise his accent, praise his vocal posture. I've seen genuine reviews from people who are like, yeah, I am a cowboy. Like, I'm a modern cowboy. And this guy literally walks like he's from Wyoming, walks like he's a cowboy. Like, I've read people online saying that he's this authentic. There was actually a training camp that they did for Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger. They did like a multi-week camp training and being cowboy. And they said Heath Ledger barely needed any help because he grew up on kind of a ranch in Australia where he grew up, or New Zealand, whatever it was. And he had a lot of experience with these different things they were teaching him, tying knots, riding horses, and different stuff like that. And so he's kind of a natural. And I don't know how he nailed all these aspects so well, but he was a very naturally talented person.
Yeah, both of them, Jake Gyllenhaal, Heath Ledger, they sold me that they were cowboys and that they knew what they were doing. I was watching an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal, and he was saying, like, yeah, when we were going through working with all these animals and stuff, like, Heath Ledger would just go up to the horse and say, like, calm down. And the horse would just, like, just settle down. And then he's like, I'm going to ride you now. And then he gets on the horse, and the horse is, like, accepted and all calm. And Jake Gyllenhaal was saying that he was, like, the opposite. Like, that was something that he didn't grow up with. He didn't grow up around animals, and that he actually got a dog for this role to where he can, like, be interacting with animals more often. And
so cool.
He was like, yeah, Heath Ledger was just a natural with all of this stuff, and I had to get used to interacting and touching and being around animals so much. So it's crazy how, like, these actors really have to dedicate a lot of time to just learning, like, even just all the different locations and stuff. Like, they had to get to those locations. They had to, like, they were working for a lot of these scenes.
There's a lot of coaching and training that goes into it just to, like, make something look natural, like make the role feel lived in. And Heath Ledger said that he would isolate himself and just kind of walk around in an empty room, getting into the headspace of the character, getting into the thought process of why he feels this way. And all of that and that dialect coach talks about this too, like making an accent feel lived in. Like, all these aspects that we're talking about, this training and stuff, is so that when they're doing it on camera, it seems natural, because they can't look like they're thinking about any of these things that they're doing. It's an impressive talent, acting.
Yeah, they sold it 100% for sure. Let's kind of dive into the story a little bit more.
Before we dive into the story, before we forget, I want to thank our listeners. So thank you guys very much if you made it this far into the episode. We appreciate everyone who listens or watches our show. If I can finish that thought.
If you watched it in the past.
whichever one it was.
I don't know how you're seeing this.
But we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you could, feel free to share us with a friend or family and leave a like and a comment. We love to engage with everyone about the show.
Very nice. So I think I was getting a little ahead of myself, because I remember earlier, before we started recording, that you had this new segment idea or this little game or something that you wanted to do on this episode.
Yeah, just kind of break things up a little bit. I want to hit you
keeping me on my toes here.
I'm gonna hit you with a would you rather, just real quick,
geez.
and I'm gonna try to relate it to the movies that we're watching. So
Okay.
My question for you, and this is a little bit tailored to you, but would you rather every summer you have to live in the mountains? You have to live like they lived in this movie. Mm-hmm. Okay, all summer.
Yeah, so I'd be a cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at any time, always, you have to ride a horse to any destination you're going. No more cars.
Oh. I think I would definitely pick riding a horse to every location.
Just think about your competition, like getting to Orlando.
I'd just pick a closer competition. I'm a homebody, so, like, if I just had access to only a horse or, like, whatever, that's the rules. Like, I feel like I could just, close my circle a little bit and I'll be good to go.
I knew that was a tough call, because I knew how much you would hate to live in the woods.
Yeah. I mean, I've camped before and stuff.
Yeah, but a summer's a long time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like
3 months.
Because then, like, I couldn't do my competition because I'd be cowboying the whole entire summer. I couldn't do this podcast because I'd be a cowboy for the whole summer. So for me, that's kind of easy. What would you pick?
For me, it's a really tough choice, but I guess I would pick...
I'm assuming you'd have to be away from everyone too, right?
Yeah.
Like, besides,
yeah.
like,
Well, here's the thing: you can't ride
with.
in a car at all. You can't have somebody drive you anywhere. because the rule is you have to travel by horseback.
Yeah,
So you really can't. I guess I'd pick the same.
Yeah.
But it's 3 months is just a long
You
time.
can't spend 3 months without me.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say Sierra, but yeah.
No.
It's mostly you.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it.
Let us know your answers to the would you rather in the comments.
All right. Do you have another one, or is that?
That's what we got for this episode.
Okay, I like it.
Just a little,
nice,
just
short, something to think about. That's good. All right. So this story actually starts with them cowboying in the mountains. You want to kind of go through there and walk how this movie starts in this first act?
Yeah. So the movie, I see it through these 3 acts, but also through the progression of the relationship. So when they first meet, they're in this, it's like portable little trailer where where Aguirre conducts his business. And I feel like they're kind of, I didn't plan this pun, but I am going to say it anyway. They're kind of sheepish, where they kind of stealing glances at each other. They're kind of peeking at each other like they don't really know what to make of this other guy, which, anybody would do if you're about to spend a couple months living in the woods with them. But, context clues, like I said, changes the way you and I watch the movie in the time period. So I kind of see them feeling each other out, kind of glancing at each other. Maybe they happen to notice that the other gentleman is an attractive man. It's the start of this relationship between them, and it starts off on this note that they are going to spend a lot of time together. It's going to be an intimate experience, whether they want or not. They introduce themselves, and we get off very quickly that Ennis is a man of few words. He's succinct, but he lets us know, they set the stage telling us that his parents died when he was young and he was raised by his brother and sisters. So that gives us a lot of information about Ennis that we'll come to see, a lot about his repression. I don't think, even before his parents were gone, he wasn't really taught to emote, in a healthy way. His dad obviously dragged him out to look at a dead gay man and show him this to strike fear God into him, basically, and show him what could happen. Not that I don't think in any sense that his dad suspected that he was gay, but just to kind of show them like, this is how things are around here. And so we get that set in our minds very early for this relationship, who the two characters are. And as we learn more and more about them, we know that Jack grew up rodeoing. Ennis gives away very little for the absolute longest time. So I see something that is, I think, very interesting is they establish Jack's risk-taking behavior. So his rodeoing, which is obviously very dangerous, he's a little bit cocky, a little bit proud, but he's a thrill seeker. He's willing to take risks. He's a dreamer. In every way, as we go along, these two characters kind of are on parallel lines, but opposite sides of a barrier. Because I see, Ennis is cautious and Jack is a risk taker. Ennis is withdrawn and Jack is outspoken.
Outgoing, yeah.
Ennis is like I'm missing the words, but we see them basically as two sides of the same coin. And I'm gonna look for my description here. So I see Ennis like as an expression of loneliness, or I see Jack as an expression of loneliness and Ennis as an expression of repression. And it's just cool, the small details that they tie in through this story. I mean, in the beginning, did you foresee the kind of path their relationship was going to take?
Kind of. I mean, you get hints, like you said, like you got some. What do you got?
I finally remember what I was trying to say. Ennis is cynical and Jack is optimistic. Ennis is a realist and Jack is an idealist. Those were the adjectives that I was looking for. So we see that all throughout the story, right? Because I was so lost in my train of thought there for a second, floating out in who knows where. But
don't go too far now.
Like, throughout the story, we see it again and again. You got you got the risk-taking behavior at the beginning where Jack is the initiator. He's the one to take the first move. He takes Ennis's hand and moves it over onto him and initiates that interaction.
It could have just been really cold.
No, but it never would have happened without Jack, I don't think, because Ennis, he wouldn't have done anything. I think Ennis was infatuated with Jack from very early on, and you see some of the looks. I think the way that Jack's personality attracts him. The idea of the person that he wants to be, the person that he's like, oh, a mayor couldn't shake me. Like, he's confident, he's expressive, he's outgoing. He wants to be this kind of person that is like, that has that level of confidence because he's so built on fear. Ennis has so much fear, and Jack seems courageous. Like, he's like he's like, this mayor could never shake me. And I think the way that he is with the horse is one of the first things that endears Ennis towards Jack. And he like kind of starts to build this little crush towards him. And Jack shows us that he through all these different ways, with the horse, with the rodeoing, with being the initiator, that he's the risk taker, that he's the emboldened one. And Ennis is really attracted to that from the very beginning. But then we have these other details, like throughout the story, Jack is saying, Ennis, I want us to have a life together. Like, let's leave our wives. Let's go have a farm together, a ranch together, and we'll live this happy life together. He's idealist. He's optimistic. He's
not afraid for other people to see who he truly is.
He wants to be happy, and he's willing to take those risks to be happy. But Ennis is the one always rebuffing him because of all these feelings that Ennis has, where he's the complete opposite of Jack. But he's attracted to him for being the opposite of him. So I think that's why I like the story so much, because there's all these details where they feel like real fleshed out characters, and it plays out in a realistic way. Like, the constantly rejecting Jack is just all out of this fear that Ennis has that was instilled with him, what we talked about with his parents, with his dad showing him this at a very young age. The root of Ennis is fear that he won't be accepted, that he might be killed. But I even think his deepest fears are just about perception, because Ennis doesn't seem to fear these other guys at the firework display. He doesn't seem to fear physical violence. He's willing to fight these two guys at once, but he fears public perception, and he fears the lack of acceptance or self-acceptance or reciprocation even. And it really stunts his life and ruins his life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so Act 1 kind of ends when they leave that mountain for the first summer that they're working there, and it transitions into a scene that we kind of already talked about, where they were talking about, hey, like, when are we gonna see each other? Are you gonna come back next summer? Blah blah blah. I don't know. Maybe the army will get me. You know, like, they were kind of making up little excuses of like why it wouldn't work. And in that moment, it seemed like Jack was hoping Ennis would try a little bit harder, you know, to make an effort to possibly see each other again. And throughout this second act here, a lot of time goes by. And the next time that they see each other is 4 years later. You want to pick up from there?
Yeah. I mean, 4 years later, now they have their own separate past. They have their own separate families, if I'm remembering the order perfectly.
Yep.
And I mean, it may not be perfectly, but, Lorene is now with Jack. Ennis now is with Alma. They both have kids or kids on the way. And Jack finds where Ennis is and sends him this postcard. Jack, again, being the initiator, being the risk taker, wanting to push for going to get together again. Mm-hmm. Ennis obviously clearly is very excited by this. He's just not the initiator. When he sees the card, he's elated, but
then he sends it back and it says,
You bet.
You bet.
Yeah, right?
Like,
he's
that's
excited.
That's all you've
But he's also very short about it. You're right.
Like,
but
you haven't talked to this guy in 4 years, man.
But for him, that's also like genuinely excited. You know? You bet is like an emphatic response.
Right.
But it's really like it's so interesting because Jack, while he's the initiator, it also puts him in like this really bad position. Because I think that there's a metaphor again in the shot where he lassos Ennis, right? Like he walks up to Ennis, who's sitting all depressed because the summer's having to end early in the first act, jumping around. But he lassos him as a little joke. But he's always trying to lasso Ennis. Like he's trying to corral him.
Secure him.
Yeah, he wants this life, and Ennis is always running away, like to be escaped. Like it's in the it's a metaphor throughout the movie. They're trying to herd the sheep. You know, Ennis is like the sheep. He wants to corral him. He's trying to tame the mare, the horse. Ennis is like the horse. He can't be settled down or broken in. He doesn't want to be controlled. He's going to do what he wants to do. And then there's even the layer of Ennis laughing at Jack, saying, "I thought there was a mare you couldn't tame. How'd it throw you off?" Ennis is the mare. He's bucking him. He's throwing him off. He can't be pinned down. And Jack is confident. I mean, Jack's probably had luck with ladies. I mean, look at Jake Gyllenhaal's face. He's probably had luck with ladies that he can't have with Ennis because he can't, break him in.
Yeah.
Can't control him. And Ennis is just too afraid to be taken in like that. So in this act, we see that this has gotten so bad that they both have basically just fake lives, which 60s and 70s, very commonplace, very unfortunate, but very commonplace that they would have these beards, these, relationships that they're just maintaining for public appearance. And when he gets that "you bet" in the mail, they start every couple months. It seems like Jack will come up to Wyoming, to Riverton. Yeah. Come up to Riverton, and they, escape off to themselves. But the first time that they do this is shocking in the movie. Is it not?
Ennis initiates in this instance. They haven't seen each other in 4 years.
Ennis runs out the house to see him.
Yes. And then pushes him out of sight and starts making out with him. And they're in their front yard.
I think despite everything that we see from or hear from the dialogue, Ennis may even want the relationship more. Mm-hmm. He just his how much he wants it is here, and his fear is that much
just
higher.
Above, yeah.
Because Jack
shocked me.
It shocked me too. But
what are you doing, man?
I was saying the other day
wait
that
15 minutes for you guys to leave.
I remember the moments my jaw dropped watching a movie. The last time it happened was when I was watching Hereditary, and spoiler alert for Hereditary, cover your ears. There's a girl whose head gets smacked against the post. All right. And when that happened, I was jumped out of my seat, jaw dropped. This is one of the most jaw dropping moments I've ever seen in a movie. And I kind of felt a degree of that, in this scene where he runs out the door, kisses her, kisses him.
Almost not want to watch because you're like, whoa, man, you're not supposed to do this yet. It's like you're going to get in trouble. Your wife's going to see.
Not even as much covering my eyes. It's just my hands on my head in panic. Here's how I see the scenario is your wife has been married to you for years, and she has seen this Stonehenge of a man, so unemotional, unreacting, unflinching, and she sees him wait around all day for this buddy of his.
Check the window multiple times.
And then he jumps, leaps off,
runs out the door
runs out the door. Never seen him smile, and he's giddy like a kid on their first day of school running out the door. You think she's not going to follow you out the door and come to introduce herself to your friend? Even if she didn't see you that excited, she'd probably just be polite enough to come outside. And I was like, she's going to see him. She's going to see him. She has to.
They were right in front.
They're in the wide open. Yeah. I was like, you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught. And of course he does. And like I said, Alma in that moment really doesn't have a look. I just watched a clip of it recently. She doesn't have a look of surprise on her face. She has a look of just and she turns around and walks away. And she doesn't confront him. She just sits and wallows in that sadness.
Yeah, not only in that moment does she not confront him, but later she doesn't confront him until they're divorced.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Why wouldn't she say something? She must be very close to not being able to display her feelings, or maybe she fears.
I think the same way that Ennis is afraid of public perception, I think she's afraid of losing her family. And I think she thinks if she can play pretend and play house, that maybe this won't be an issue, or maybe it'll even go away. But after so much time, I think she just breaks. She's another example of the build and build and build and explode, which is kind of how this movie works too, is because it can be slow. Definitely. I could see, somebody telling me that this movie is slow because it's a build and then there's a few explosions, bursts in the movie.
Yeah, it's definitely slow, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And we'll get more into that for our backseat directing segment. But yeah, let's continue on with the story
arcs of the movie. So then they're doing this every couple months, like we said, and they're living these lives where, like we said, there's this builds and explodes. We see Ennis have a fight at the fireworks display. We see Jack, have this great scene. One of my favorite scenes in the movie where he lets loose on his father-in-law. I saw a clip of that scene actually.
My favorite scene was when he let loose with Anne Hathaway.
No. Cut the cameras. No. But that scene is so good when he yells at the father-in-law. He says, "Sit down, you old son of a bitch.
Yeah.
This is my house. This is my son, and you are my guest."
That's
you,
like,
that's
that's
so
like the
good.
point where you're sitting on the couch and then you like lean forward on the edge of the couch and you're like, let's go.
Tell him.
Because like, I don't know. Do you ever feel like that with like your in-laws? It's just like, man, like I just really want to say this, but I can't say this.
No, my actually very fortunate in my case, and I'm not just saying it for the cameras. I have
Or not even in-laws, just like
there's
boss
people
at work.
Oh, there's
you know,
people.
like,
Yeah,
or just like some situation.
customers at work.
Oh yeah,
You're
Or,
like, gotta be
just, like,
professional. Yeah,
you have to be very polite, whether it's for like your family or whatever. But you just don't want to anymore, like because.
But for someone like that, like a gay man in the 70s, like you're always putting on a facade. You're always holding something back. So for him to like unleash on him is like means something a little different. Which
You see Anne Hathaway too. She like kind of looks down and
smiled,
smiles.
yeah.
She's happy about it. She's happy that he stood up to her dad. You know, which that was a cool scene.
yeah, the movie does this really cool thing where it juxtaposes, back and forth these things that are traditionally masculine. And it's making the point that like being a gay man does not mean that you are necessarily feminine. And there's nothing inherently wrong with being a masculine man, a feminine man, or a feminine woman or a masculine woman. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The movie is
whether you're straight or not.
Yeah, the movie's about the dangers of not being who you are. So like I think she's excited to see him like display like this masculine emotion. Mm-hmm. But like the juxtaposition of this movie is like making the point to you that like he can be tenderly loving with another man and wrapped in that embrace, and then he can also be, tradition things that are considered traditionally masculine, like aggressive, assertive, like, and that is true. Like it's something that hadn't been depicted a lot in Hollywood before. So
Yeah, go ahead.
So moving forward with the plot from there, where do we go next? They've had this, we've explained they've got this long, I think we should hit the big speech from Jake Gyllenhaal just real quick. So basically all this hiding of their emotions and sexuality comes to a head with this camping trip where you have this iconic speech from Jake Gyllenhaal, really well delivered, really well acted, where he tells him like, it's not as easy for me as it is for you. You don't know how bad it gets. All these things like he's been to Mexico and he's really like it's like his cry for help. Like he's like, I can't keep doing this. I've been begging you for us to have our life together and you keep turning me down. I'm unhappy. And he says, I wish I knew how to quit you. Cause like to him, Ennis is like, it's like tobacco or like an addiction. He keeps going back because it's an addiction of happiness. And then when he's away from him, he's sad. And Ennis is refusing to let him be happy as he sees it.
Okay, and then moving on to Act 3, Ennis gets another postcard in the mail, and it says that Jack has passed away.
Yeah, it must have been a return postcard that Ennis sent, letting him know that the recipient is deceased. And I was watching this thinking like, man, that must be such a punch in the face if this is like a complete spoiler to you. Did you know that was going to happen?
No.
Was it shocking? Because I knew it was going to happen.
You did know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was speechless. I was like, why?
What do you mean?
I was like, why? Why did this happen? Like they just were in a fight. Why did he die now? Like why?
It's always the worst time.
Yeah, like why?
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that.
Yeah, it's like it's so tragic. And when he calls Lorene, she is giving him this story that he was pumping up a tire on the side of the road, exploded and killed him, which and then we see played out in Ennis's mind his worst fears, like this gang of thugs coming to kill Jack, presumably for his sexuality. I think that is the reality. Do you think that was Ennis's fear, or do you think that was the reality?
That's what I was going to say. I think it was the reality.
That's how I interpret it too, because Lorene doesn't seem like there's any love lost. I know Jack said earlier in the movie they could do their marriage over a phone, but even people who don't have a very loving marriage would still be really emotional talking about their death. And she seems very calm. So I think she seems like she would maybe have more of her father's ideals, because her father's clearly, her father says about his grandson, oh, you want him to grow up and be a man, right? He's got to watch football. So he's got very traditionalist beliefs. I think she kind of shares those. I think she probably knew that he was gay and accepted that this happened to him because he was gay. I think she wasn't super emotional. And then I also think he was literally like a top equipment salesman. Like he was driving this tractor around the parking lot of his father-in-law's workshop. I don't think he's the kind of guy with our knowledge of who he is, you know,
To not know how to pump a tire.
Yeah. I don't think that's a realistic cover story. I think he was beaten to death.
I think that like flash was reality to what happened, especially since we know that Ennis has seen that outcome before. So I think it was kind of like just a tie, you know.
And to show us that Ennis knows.
Yeah. And to show too, like that in a way Ennis was right. Like his biggest fears kind of came true.
But I think the ultimate takeaway is that his biggest fears came true despite all of his precautions. Right. That he was so cautious that he was still unable to protect. Kind of like we talked about with Keller Dover in Prisoners. Or Oogway has a really good line in Kung Fu Panda where he says, one often meets their destiny on the path to avoid it. And I've always thought that kind of rang true. So I think that this is a really life-changing event, obviously, for Ennis. And I think this is the summation of his character arc in the movie, is when she tells him that he wanted his ashes spread at Brokeback Mountain. Because at this point in the movie, Brokeback Mountain's kind of become this like idyllic place. They reference it like he says, all we have now is Brokeback Mountain.
It becomes its own character.
Yeah, it does. And I think I also see it like as in their memory and in the film, the memory kind of the film itself as like a paradise. Like Brokeback Mountain's this idyllic place. It's this mountains and streams, and they could be who they really want to be, and they're happy and in love, and the sun shines. But there's, like I mentioned, the looming metaphor of the storm. You know, there's the building, the storm represents the build up, the charging up, and the explosion that we see in different points in the film. And it also represents kind of the fears of Ennis and the outside world that's looming and the danger. And then you've got Brokeback Mountain, that's like this heavenly place. And when they leave Brokeback Mountain and go to their real lives, a lot of the shots are desolate, flat, depressing, boring.
Yeah, gray.
Yeah. And so I think that all this representation around Brokeback Mountain, where he wants his ashes spread, this all lends to why it means so much. It's also kind of one of the last wishes he can get, his last connection to Jack. So he goes to pick up the ashes from Jack's parents.
Tough scene.
Oh, yeah. Super emotional. I mean, you can tell that his parents know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And his parents, in their own way, both seem to have this acceptance for their son. They seem to have... It's almost, especially in the dad, it's like a begrudging acceptance, but it's an I love my son. And we see that in the dad's refusal to give him the ashes. He says he's going to be buried in the family plot. Somebody who hated their son would not make that strong of a stance to keep him with the family forever. And the mother, just through her connection with Ennis, like she's like, please come back. She like invites him up to see Jack's room upstairs. Like, she loves her son.
Which, how sad was his room?
Oh, yeah.
She's like, yeah, we haven't
just
touched
a window
it since he was a kid. What do you mean? There's nothing in there.
There's no Batman posters or nothing.
Yeah.
Come on.
What the heck?
But also to literally go into the closet and to find their shirts wrapped over each other in the closet. Like such a plain as day metaphor. And then the shirt, he has... Ennis's shirt, Jack has Ennis's shirt draped around his shirt. And then further to the end of the movie, Jack still has that. Actually, I think Jack might have his shirt around Ennis's shirt, and then Ennis reverses it for the end of the movie. I could be wrong on that. You can check me on that. But basically, the way Ennis has it at the end of the movie is definitely with Ennis's shirt on the outside, kind of like he's always embracing Jack in a way. Mm-hmm. And he has it hung up next to a picture of Brokeback Mountain. So it's like Jack is still connected to Brokeback Mountain because ultimately the father refuses to give him the ashes. And I like that Ennis respected that. I wish almost that he would have got the ashes from Lorene, because she's mentioned she had the other half of his ashes, and Lorene didn't really seem to care about Jack. So I wish Ennis could have had those to spread at Brokeback Mountain. But you're right.
Could you imagine believing something that strongly to where like your husband died and you're like, that's just what happens?
Yeah. I mean, even if like I hated my spouse,
maybe it's
just spending
them at that point.
I guess, yeah. I mean,
'cause
letters wouldn't have traveled that fast in
pass
1980s.
through time like really quickly in this movie. So like maybe it's been a year, maybe it's been a while since they've last seen each other since he passed away. So like maybe the wife, Anne Hathaway's character, has had time to grieve. Maybe.
I think her face was just too stoic. I think
Yeah.
they did it on purpose to show her.
Yeah. You want to go into a little bit of our backseat directing segment?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so this is where we put ourselves in the director's seat and we second or even throw in our opinions of what we would change in this movie. And I have a few things here. The first one is a change. Jack Twist. Come on, we can do better than that. we can do better than Jack Twist.
And Del Mar rolls off the tongue really well.
Yeah, that's a cool name. That's a cool cowboy name right there.
I like when Linda Cardinelli says
but
it.
Jack Twist, it just felt like out of place. It felt wrong. I don't know. Sounds like a porn star's name.
It did feel cartoonish. Like whose last name is?
I felt like I couldn't take it seriously when I heard his name, Twist. Like, I don't know. We can do better. We can do better. What do you got for? Do you have one? We'll kind of ping pong back and forth here.
Things that I would change.
Yeah, or things that you would agree with, and what's the word when you're like reinforce?
Yeah,
things that you would reinforce.
If something I would change is, I don't particularly love the note that the movie ended on. I feel like it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. Emotional but positive vibe. But I also feel like I would have liked to see the character development play out a little more. I get that Ennis agreeing to prioritize his daughter and prioritize his daughter's wedding is kind of a big deal for him. But I maybe would have liked to see that character growth play out like a little bit more, because it just seems like a small bite of the pie for all that we've been through.
Yeah, we really didn't get to see a ton of his relationship with his kids either. So like that's what we're ending on. It just feels like maybe a little incomplete. That was another thing that I had on my list, is like, why did Jack have to die? Like what if Jack went a separate way or something, like, I don't know. I just, maybe it was because I was watching and I just wasn't ready for the main character, to pass away like he did.
It feels like so strange when he dies, because with him being such a main character, you would think they would show you something before they hit you with the knowledge that he's died.
Yeah, it was very like subtle, and like that's kind of the theme of the whole movie, in terms of how they like pass time. Like sometimes you don't realize time's passed until you've been in that time for a little bit of time. You know what I mean? That might have been a little convoluted there, but like even when they're on the mountain in the first act, like a lot of time is passing from scene to scene, but they don't necessarily like tell you that. They kind of just show you that repeatedly, and then you kind of pick up on like, okay, a lot of time is going on here or passing, and then that's kind of what happens when he passes away too, is like kind of out of nowhere, even though it might not have been out of nowhere in the actual story of life.
But we have sung this movie's praises a lot, but to go on things that I would keep the same or reinforce is the acting, the writing. If I could pick a really particular thing, it would be the practical sets. Like the way they shot out in nature is just, you can't really replace that. And they shot with actual sheep, which is really cool as well, to have these herds of animals. And I think there's moments in Hillside Views, one in particular comes to mind, where the sheep are probably not actually there, but anywhere they're near the sheep is real sheep. And the Ang Lee actually has a funny anecdote about this, where he had shot using sheep in, I think he did a movie, Sense and Sensibility. And the sheep were just really hard to deal with. Like, sheep don't drink from a running water source. Apparently, they only drink from a pond or lake, sitting water, and they could not get these sheep to drink. So he vowed that he wouldn't work with sheep again. And then I don't know how common this is in filmmaking, but he ended up working with sheep again in this movie. And good thing that he did, because them being there practically, it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I would second all the things that you said as well. One of the things I think that this isn't a negative. It's more of an observation, and maybe it's not like how I would approach it, but it's definitely not something that I'm criticizing in a negative way. But this movie is slow. Some parts, I could see myself drifting a little bit, and losing focus a little bit from the story. But at the same time, because it was so slow, it felt so real. The whole time it felt like real life. It felt like the pace of real life. How you're just going through your day-to-day chores and work and job and family relations, like there wasn't anything like over the top. It was all very realistic.
Yeah.
And sometimes life itself is a little boring, a little slow,
This is where the cinematography and the writing pick up a lot of the legwork is with the pacing, because it might have moments of slow pacing, but I never checked my watch during this movie. I didn't check to see how much time was left in the movie. I was engrossed in the movie myself personally the whole time, wondering what was going to happen next, locked in completely. So I wasn't scrolling or anything. So I feel like they managed to use the slow pacing in an effective way where I was still drawn in the whole time.
Yeah, overall, great story, great acting, great movie. I'm excited that we kind of change genres a little bit here, and watch something different from what we're normally reviewing.
We may not get as many views as our DC or Marvel content, but all right, I'm going to skip the curse word. I freaking love doing this. These kind of movies makes me so happy. It just feels like there's so much to chew on, like the metaphors and everything from like the landscape. I've seen people describe the mountains as in Brokeback as being like traditional manly things. They're rigid, they're strong, they're tall, they're powerful. It's everything like.
And this is storytelling.
Yeah,
this isn't necessarily entertainment. You kind of understand the difference of like, or I kind of understand the difference, or get the feeling that like the Marvel and DC stuff, like that's entertainment.
Yeah.
But this is storytelling. Like I wasn't like happy at the end of this movie, but that doesn't mean that it was a bad story.
It doesn't mean it wasn't valuable.
Story.
Yeah.
It was a risky story, especially for the time, and it was a relatable story in a lot of senses, in a lot of ways, so yeah, it was great to jump into something different, and I'm glad that we have that opportunity on this podcast to talk about whatever the heck we want.
Be your own boss.
Yeah, so we want to thank everyone who has watched this episode, watched previous episodes. We appreciate.
I get the feeling that you're wrapping up, but did you want to hear my fun facts?
Your fun facts? Yeah, man, sure. I am looking over at my camera there, and I noticed that I have my battery in rather than the AC adapter. So that battery does look like it's getting a little low. So let me change that real quick because I'm afraid it's going to cut out.
Okay.
All right. Got the camera fixed. Andrew, fun facts.
All right. I'm ready with my fun facts. So, Aaron, did you know?
Yes.
Did you know that the shirts worn by Jack and Ennis in this movie, prominently featured at the end of the film, were sold at auction on eBay for, can you guess how much?
So much, probably.
$101,000.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, they were bought by a gentleman. I believe he's a gay rights activist. He purchased them, said that he would never wear them, alter them, really touch them, but just to preserve them as the iconic piece of the history of cinema and LGBTQ culture that they are. So pretty cool.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's absolutely awesome. It's an insane sum of money. There was also
where'd that money go to?
I think like the production, the studio, I believe, sold it. So I don't think it went to any particular cause. I'd have to double check that. I don't see any cause listed on here. just making extra money
into millionaires' pockets already.
But so as we know, the lovemaking in this film is really rough. as I learned at 9 years old. It's really physical, and the performance of acting was really physical. So there's an interview where Jake Gyllenhaal was talking about he's filming the scene like multiple times with Heath Ledger, and they're like getting really physical. And he said that at one point Heath Ledger almost broke his nose. I guess he got knocked upside the face pretty good at one point when they were trying to film it. So yeah, it was.
Was that during like that fight scene that they had on the mountain?
No, it was the lovemaking.
Oh, wow.
I think the initial scene.
Dang, he was getting into it.
He said there's, you know what? It may not have been, because he said there's a scene where like, I think he said it was in a scene where Heath Ledger pushed him up against the wall, and then he pushed him up against the wall, something like that. So it may have been when they were filming that kiss, in front of Alma. Also, Heath Ledger and Michelle Williams, who plays Alma, the couple who are married in the movie, fell in love filming the movie and got married, and later got divorced.
Wow, wild!
I did not know that going into this at all.
Did she see him kissing Christian Bale?
That I've missed that scene in The Dark Knight. Also, the movie saved Ang Lee from early retirement. I guess he was going to retire before this movie came out, and he came out out of interest of doing this movie. And also, amongst the contenders for people, there was a lot of people in contention for this role. Apparently, it's rumored that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were considered to play the roles of Jack and Ennis.
Wow. Besties.
This is very Owen Wilson response.
Wow.
Also, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Billy Crudup, Colin Farrell, as well as we already mentioned Joaquin Phoenix and Josh Hartnett were all considered, which is really interesting. I mean, this must have been a very highly appraised script. Like, they must have known from the jump, all these people because they had high value targets in mind for this. I'm glad the people that they ended up with. I think the movie is chef's kiss, perfect with the way it is.
Agreed.
But those are my fun facts, and I owe a lot of thanks for it to Screen Rant. I want to shout out Screen Rant. Their website has a list of interesting fun facts behind the scenes for this movie.
Definitely. And I think that's a great note to end this episode on. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching and supporting. We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday on our YouTube and our Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all the other podcast platforms. Go ahead and hit that subscribe and follow button, and give us a follow on Spotify. That helps the podcast out a bunch. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and Facebook Reels. We post that every single day. So hit us up in the comments. A bunch of you guys have been on some of those episodes where we've been doing debates, like should superheroes kill, or some of the other ones. The Sokovia Accords, was Iron Man right or Captain America right? And even for some reason, people are really getting on to me about the sharks in Aquaman. So thank you so much for commenting and interacting with us. We love to see it, and we love interacting with you guys. Thank you so much, and
that's a wrap.